Have you got boxes full of old or new photos and no idea what to do with them? Are you intrigued by the people in these photos and do you want to find out more about them? In this podcast episode, I'm chatting to Hazel Thornton from Organize for Life about why the story behind the photos can help you create a family legacy.
You're listening to the Declutter Hub podcast, bringing you tried and tested, no-nonsense tips and advice from the leading experts in decluttering and organising your home. Now here's your host, Ingrid Jansen.
Hello and welcome, listeners, to episode 189. I'm Ingrid, and if you're a brand new listener, thank you so much for being here. We so appreciate you listening in, and don't forget to hit that subscribe button so you don't miss our weekly podcast. And if you've been listening in for a while, you are in for a treat because we've got something really special happening here today, because I'm talking to my friend and fellow professional organizer, Hazel. And Hazel is from all the way in Albuquerque in New Mexico. That's like super far. That's like so much time difference. I can't even get my head around it, how much time difference that is. And we're going to talk all about photos and stories and genealogy and memories and keepsakes. And oh my gosh, I'm super excited. So Hazel, thank you so much for being here.
Hi, Ingrid. Thanks for having me. It's fun to talk to you.
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate you taking the time to do this for us. And you combine your genealogy research and your skills and professional organizing experience to help clients tell the stories of their photos and families and things. We've got a lot to dive into, but I want to start at the beginning. I like the beginning. You were a professional organizer, right? And then you kind of niche down into genealogy. How did that go?
I think once an organizer, always an organizer. But after about 10 years of being a hands-on professional organizer and a member of NAPO, I joined APO at the time, and it's now called the Photo Managers. And I thought I was going to become a digital photo organizer, a virtual photo organizer. But instead, I was reminded by the people in the Photo Managers group about how much I love genealogy, because they're always talking about the photos and the stories and the sharing of the photos and the curating of the photos and, you know, the getting rid of the thousands of photos that are meaningless to us that we take every day, and really focusing on families and sharing. And a lot of them have genealogy as a specialty, but they don't mean that they do genealogy research. They mean that they help genealogists with their photos, organize their photos. So it reminded me that I have a passion for genealogy that I had put on the back burner for years. So I've been doing genealogy off and on for about 30 years. And I never thought I wanted to do it for clients because I just didn't think I wanted to until I started doing it. I thought I would not be as interested in their families as I should be to be charging money to do it. But once I started doing it, I found that I was every bit as interested in their families. If I was the one doing the research, I was highly invested in their families. And then, so it's kind of the whole thing just kind of dovetailed for me, the organizing and the photos and the genealogy into my new book.
Right. So just to have it clear in my head, because there's a lot of terminology and I just want to make sure that I've got it all right and squared off in my head. Genealogy, is that the research into family trees? Is that a statement that I can make? Is that like making a family tree and finding out when people lived and died and who's connected?
It's the research part of it. And people, sometimes I talk in terms of genealogy. Sometimes I use the term family history or family history research, because people get intimidated by the word genealogy. They're like, I don't want to do that. That sounds scary and hard. And it's not scary and hard. but I understand why they feel that way.
Mhm.
So genealogy is like a tool for documenting the relationships between people. And then family history is a kind of a softer, friendlier term. And it would include genealogy, but it would also include the storytelling and the photos and the sharing of the stories with your family.
Let's talk some more about that later, but that clarifies a little bit for me what the difference is. So you had a love for genealogy. You were a professional organizer. Then you kind of thought, oh, photo organizing sounds fantastic as well. You did a lot of around that. And then you kind of thought, I love genealogy too. And you kind of combined the two, and that's kind of taken you on a whole path. And now you help your clients with genealogy.
Yeah, some of them want me to do the research for them. Others want to learn how to do it, and so I help them learn how to do it.
Yeah.
And but they all, no matter how many names and dates we dredge up from the past, I try to tie it into, okay, what kind of stories do you have? You know, sometimes the stories lead to the names and the dates, and sometimes vice versa. Sometimes we find things online that we never knew about, and it's like, oh, that's part of the story we never knew about.
Fantastic. It must be totally fascinating.
It is. It's really fun, and it also one of the reasons that I like it so much is that it kind of makes history come alive. I never was interested in history before I started doing genealogy research, and if I'm researching an ancestor in a period of time, I end up learning about that period of time, and it just makes it seem like I'm getting to know them, even though they're long dead.
Yeah. Oh my gosh, that sounds absolutely fascinating. So you have then written a book. I'm going to show this to you. So if you're watching this on YouTube, I'm going to show the book, and you can see my little notes in there because I've read Hazel's book. You listeners know me. I read all of the books that my guests talk about because I want to make sure that I can ask the proper questions that I would want to know if I was listening. And there is a lovely book, and it's called What's a Photo Without a Story? How to Create Your Family Legacy. And I would love to know a little bit more about how decluttering and organizing your photos can then help you with the genealogy. So let's start there.
Some people don't know how to start telling their story.
Yeah.
And one of the things that make my book different are that I realize that people have different goals with their projects, and if I were to say, okay, do this, do this, do this, do this, and you would have this kind of outcome. Well, not everybody wants that outcome.
Yeah.
So everybody has a different goal. So in my book, I present ways of accomplishing adding photos to stories, adding stories to photos, getting started with genealogy, telling the stories of your things too. I present it as, pick and choose. You can pick and choose. You can do these low effort things, or you can take it up to a medium effort or a high effort. And it depends on your level of wherewithal, your level of interest and your goal and your the money. Some things cost money, some things are free, and your energy level.
Yeah. And probably also how much time you've got available, right? Because I think once you start to dive into this project, it's like, I read a quote somewhere in your book, it's like, it's never ending.
So if you're looking at photos, I mean, this applies to things as well. If you're looking at photos and you've got thousands of photos in your digital camera, and you've got photos under your bed and in albums and in boxes, and you don't even know where because you haven't looked lately and gathered them all together, if you didn't organize those photos, and if you left them all to somebody, it's basically what's going to happen to this stuff when I die. But if you do it now, you can also share the results. And if you leave it all to somebody else to deal with, then they're not going to know what to do with it. It's going to be thousands of photos that there's, gems hidden in the millions of photos that they won't know the stories of. You're the one that knows the stories. And if you don't pick a few photos, it can range from taking a paper photo and writing on the back like people used to, who's in the photo, when it was taken, where it was taken. Or in digital photos, they have what they call metadata, where you can record the information about the photo, or you can write a story in a Word document and insert a photo. There's so many different ways, and it doesn't matter which one you pick. Whichever one you want to do is fine. Just do it. And then people can focus on, oh, these are the important ones, because they might just ditch them all if you don't weed out, the important ones for them.
I must admit, I think when I read your book, I read it cover to cover. My favorite bits were the things where you shared a photo and told a story. And my favorite one in your book was the one about the mugshot with the hat and not the hat. And that was I just absolutely loved it. The whole thing. And I think you're right. I think because
skeletons in the closet.
yeah. And I think you're right. I think the story with the photo made it so interesting. The photo itself was interesting, but then reading the story connected, and I suddenly was like, I completely now get what you mean. Because when I first, heard that you did a book, I thought, what's a photo without a story? I thought, well, a photo is a photo, you can enjoy them. But when I kind of did a dive into your book, I thought, yes, you're right, Hazel, you're right. It is so much more interesting to hear why it was such a special photo.
And a lot of times you're the only one that knows. Yeah. And if you think back to, maybe your grandparents and they died, and then you wondered things about them that you wish you'd had asked them. Well, why not ask yourself those questions and leave people some stories? And why not try to find the stories that you wish you knew by doing some research into the photos that you have and don't know, and or by doing some genealogy research and finding you can meet people online who have stories about your grandparents, or and they have photos and they'll share them with you, some of them.
So would you actually, I'm not thinking this, I've not written this question down, but it's popping up in my head while we're talking about it. Would you say start actually with your own photos because you know the stories? Maybe that's easier than trying to find with old photographs that you found somewhere and then trying to work your way back. Is it kind of like to get you kind of motivated to do this project? Do you say start with your own?
Absolutely, start with your own.
Okay, good. So main question, and I love this story and I read it in your book. Who's the lady on the front of the book?
Hold it up closer so they can see it bigger. So I can see it bigger. This is my grandma Thornton. Her name is Hazel Clay Thornton. And I was named after her. And I also never met her because she died when my dad was 16. And this is another reason why I tell your stories, because I never saw that photo until I was 60 years old. And I wish I had seen it much sooner. And there's just my dad died last fall. And even at the time, it's like, I don't have any idea really why he never showed it to me sooner, whether he, it was painful to talk about, or he just never occurred to him that I had never seen it. But I was so intrigued by it that I wanted to know where it was taken, because there's a big old hotel in the back.
Yeah. And
I asked him and he didn't know. And so I did a bunch of research, and some people online thought they knew where it was in Southern California. And I'm like, that doesn't look quite like the hotel they're saying. And I eventually consulted with Maureen Taylor, the photo detective, and she helped me she made lots of suggestions. And what I did was I took census records and maps and other photos and internet articles, and I figured out which hotel it was. And it was not in Santa Monica, it was Long Beach. And the reason my dad didn't know is, because they never talked about the photos in his family. That's one reason.
Yeah.
And also because the hotel had been destroyed in 1933. It was actually just prior to the Long Beach earthquake, but that's the year he was born. So it's not like he grew up knowing what that hotel was. And it's not like anybody I know in Southern California ever saw the hotel either.
Right.
It just looked a lot like the other hotel. And so I was just so intrigued by the photo that I basically inspired me to write a book.
So this photo inspired you to create a whole book about it.
Yeah. Well, the whole book isn't about the photo.
Yeah.
I mean, so I do tell, the book is not about my family per se, but I do include several example photo stories to inspire people to write their own photo stories. Now, this one is a few pages long and goes through all the research I did. Most of them are only a paragraph or two long because they don't have to be long stories.
Yeah.
They don't have to involve a lot of research. In fact, you don't have to do, you could if the only research you did was to, show your family and say, what do you know about this photo? Maybe you just haven't done that yet. And maybe they can tell you.
Right. I love it. And I love the picture, and I love how you went about finding out information. But let's then go back to, okay, somebody's listening to this podcast and they're like, I've got so many pictures. I don't even know. I've got hard copies. I've got things on digital somewhere. I've got a CD. I've got a thumb drive. I've got a stick. I have something. I would love to talk to you about the Space Acronym.
Okay. So when I first started being an organizer, that was in the age of Julie Morgenstern's book, Organizing from the Inside Out. And she created the Space Acronym. It stands for sort, purge, assign a home, containerize, and equalize. And I just applied it in the book to photos, with her blessing, by the way. And so sorting your photos, if you have, the flip side of sorting is gathering together. So first you have to gather together all the photos you can find under the bed, in the attic, in the photo albums, in the boxes, whether they're on, like you said, whether they're on your computer or your flash drive or your camera memory card or wherever they are. If you gather them all together, then you can see how many you have, and you can sort them into categories. And now the categories that I used came from Kathy Nelson's book, Photo Organizing Made Easy. And she is the founder and CEO of the Photo Managers. And she uses the ABCs. A stands for, like they're the A, like A level, B level, like the A list. And these are the best photos. And B is, these are not the best photos, but they help tell the story. And C is literally for can. You can throw them in the trash can. They're blurry, they're boring, they're not good photos. They're photos of your lunch. They're photos of where you parked. There's lots of photos. And then S, the ABCs. So the S is for stories. Tell the story is what she recommends doing after the ABCs. And then so if you sort your photos and into categories and you assign a home for them, that means for digital photos, it might be a matter of picking a cloud drive to store them on. It could be getting an external hard drive to store them all together on, and not just in all the various places. And in the case of paper photos, it could be this: I'm going to store them in this spare bedroom, but it's going to be in this closet, on this shelf, in this box. They're not going to be scattered all over the place. And then let's see, SPA, assign a home, containerize. Containerize can have to do with physical containers, or it can have to do with, a shelf on a bookcase or files on your computer. E stands for equalize, and that just means to maintain your system. When you take new photos, either delete the bad ones as you take as you like periodically, like daily or weekly, so that you don't have them pile up into thousands of photos. Or paper photos, have a system for what are you going to do with those, where are you going to put them, and not have them just pile up and become another big pile of clutter.
Right. So can I then conclude that mostly the A photos, those are the photos that you want to tell stories about because those are the
Yes.
best of the best?
Yes.
Okay, perfect. I have more questions about then how do you go from photo organized to genealogy. So we're going to take a break and we're going to come back.
And I'll put my cat out.
I know, I was like, I saw something coming past. I'm like, what's happening? So we'll come back after the break.
Are clothes your downfall when it comes to clutter? Do you open your wardrobe every single day but never have anything to wear? Well, we have just the thing for you. Starting on Monday, the 16th of May, we have a Clear Out Your Clothes challenge. Daily live sessions, expert advice, motivation, inspiration, and a specific action plan to make sure you've only got clothes you love and wear. All the details are on declutterhub.com/clear out.
Hi everyone, welcome back. We are chatting to Hazel Thornton of Organize for Life, all about genealogy and the photos that go with stories. And just before the break, we talked about the Space Acronym and the ABC's photos. And I said, so the A photos are the best photos to write the stories about. And thankfully, Hazel agreed with me. So now I want to then take the next leap. Okay, you've kind of organized your photos. How do you then go into genealogy? And then what is the difference between genealogy and family history? So I would like to talk some more about that. Hazel, can you help me out here?
Yes. So genealogy is a tool for, it is, like you said before, it's creating a pedigree chart, which means, and pedigree charts are not just for dogs and royalty. But people get intimidated by them. And they just mean it's just a record of how people are related and going back in time. But you can tell your stories. You don't have to be interested in, your great, 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 great grandmother, especially if you have no photos of her.
Yeah.
You can focus on the people that you know or that you knew and tell their stories and not even get into genealogy.
Yeah.
But a lot of people are interested in genealogy. And then the question is, are they going to do it themselves, or are they going to pay someone else to help them do it, or ask someone else to help them if they know someone? And there's a lot of easy ways to get started, but it's not for everyone, because you do have to kind of be interested in history and doing research. And if you have no one to show you how to do it, it can be intimidating, but it can also be easy and free. And one of the free ways is to go to Family Search and just get a free account and see what's already there for your family. And then what you have to be careful of is that Family Search. Okay, I use them all, but I use mostly Ancestry, which is a paid service. And on Ancestry, my tree is my own research, and nobody can mess with it. People get confused between Ancestry and Family Search. Family Search is a world tree that's crowdsourced. So people say, oh, somebody changed my grandma's birth date. Well, that's because that's their grandma too, and they did some research and they think it was a different date. I mean, there's issues like that on Family Search, but it's a real good source of clues. I wouldn't go to Family Search and say, oh, there it is, I don't have to do any research, because it could all be wrong.
Right.
But if you're interested in finding out more about your family and getting to know your ancestors, then you just take it a generation at a time, starting with yourself and your parents and your grandparents. This is on a pedigree chart, and then your great grandparents, and you can get to know a lot about them by actually researching the documents that prove they lived and where they lived and what they did for a living, and what their family structure was, and which is what makes it more interesting than just names and dates on a pedigree chart.
Got it. And I was reading your book, and I think what I really enjoyed is that you said family history doesn't only include genealogy research materials, it's a suite of things.
True. And so if you're not at all interested in genealogy, I still recommend that you organize your family history, meaning that you organize your photos and your keepsakes and your memorabilia and your stories, and tell your stories, because future generations, maybe they're interested in doing some research, and what you leave them will help them immensely. Or it could just put a stop to the whole thing if you leave nothing to them. Oh, and the more you can share with your family while you're alive, the more you can learn and the more interesting it will be for everybody.
Yeah, yeah. It actually reminds me about, because I had Matt Paxton on the show a while back, and he has his show, The Legacy List, and he said that a lot of people through COVID started kind of chatting to their family members, because especially in the beginning, we had nothing else to do. We were all a bit like, whoa. And he said, why don't you get for example, your mom or something to show you a couple of items that she's got in her house to tell the story. And I just absolutely love that. And I've been doing this with my mom now on a couple of occasions. I said, you've got this thing in your hallway, Mom. Where does it come from? And I've now heard that she bought that on her honeymoon back in 1971 in Spain when she was. And it is just so fascinating. So it's not a photo, but in this case, it's something that she has in her house. And I
have a whole section about tell the stories of your things too.
Yes, exactly. And what I've picked up on, and I actually wanted to talk to you about, because you actually say in the book that a memorabilia and a keepsake are a lot of times mentioned as the same, but according to you, they're not the same. And I've read the description like 4 times, and I'm like, I'm still not sure if I know the difference between memorabilia and keepsake. So can you help me out, please? Because
I didn't mean to confuse you, but before we leave the subject of Matt Paxton, I've noticed that Amazon has listed my book as frequently bought together with his book.
Has it? That is brilliant, because I think there really is, there is again overlap in this as well. So I'm not surprised. I'm not surprised.
So it's okay if you mix the terms up. It's okay if you don't know the different terms. These are like dictionary definitions. Memorabilia is more often used when something has a historical significance, and so therefore it should be maybe preserved and maybe done something with. A keepsake is more like if you gave me something and it means something to me, and it's of less significance to the rest of the world, but it means something to me.
Got it. So for example, if sometimes my client says, oh, I've got here a medal of the war from my dad, that would be considered memorabilia?
Yeah. And if it was his and he didn't give it to you personally, it would be more memorabilia than a keepsake. A keepsake would be more like this mug that I gave my dad when he moved to New Mexico. It's a Starbucks mug. So when he died, I wanted it back. That's more of a keepsake. I mean, this has no historical significance. It's more of a keepsake. But if I told a story about it and something happened to me, then my brothers might say, oh, well, this mug is more important than the 20 other mugs she's got that she didn't write a story about. It might be a little bit less likely to go off to Goodwill than this one.
Yeah. Thank you. And that makes complete sense now, because I was like, I think I understand Hazel correctly, but I wanted to just run past it to make sure I've got it all in my head. Now, you actually say in your book that you've got 5 questions that you need to ask yourself when you sort out a collection of memorabilia and keepsakes. And I kind of thought, let's talk about this a little bit, because I find that very interesting. So what kind of questions should I be thinking about?
Yeah, the questions kind of apply to a family history project in general.
Yeah.
The first question is, why am I doing this?
Mm-hmm.
What is your goal? Because if your goal for a family history project is to, put together a photo album to share at your family reunion, that's a completely different goal than to research your family back to the 1600s and document all that. It's just a completely different goal. And then the question too is, why am I doing this now? Do I, again, with the family reunion, do I have a family reunion coming up? Am I trying to make a photo book for, someone's graduation or a wedding present? Those might be triggers. Am I trying to just make decisions now so my loved ones don't have to later? In which case, hopefully your demise is not imminent, but it might be good to start now and make a hobby out of it, an enjoyable hobby, rather than oh my God, I have to get this done and this isn't any fun and it's hard. Because we don't want it to be not fun. We don't want it to be hard. Question 3, I'm referring to my own book so I can remember. Why am I keeping this? So this is a basic decluttering question. Am I keeping this mug because I feel guilty getting rid of it? In which case, maybe I should just get rid of it. But if I like it for my own self, that's why I'm keeping it. Or because you're afraid you're going to forget the person. People have a hard time going through their keepsakes sometimes because they think, oh, I can't get rid of this, I'm going to forget. But if you gather them all together and you see, oh, I've got 40 things that remind me of my mom, and I don't like 10 of them, then if you got rid of those 10, you'd still have 30 left. And then question 4 is, what will others do with my memorabilia when I die? And if you have not left any instructions or any stories, there's no telling what they'll do, because they won't know what's important to you and what's not important to you. But if you just leave a few notes, or if you leave some written instructions, or if you leave something, it could be less formal or more formal, what you leave in the way of instructions, but then they'll know.
Yeah.
And the 5th one is, do I need help? Because maybe you need help sorting your photographs, and a photo organizer can help you do that. Yeah. Or a friend, or it could be free or paid. Yeah. And if you would like some help with genealogy, you can hire someone to help you do that. If you want to enlist your family members, it's a way of sharing the things and the stories, while you're all alive, to enjoy them.
Do you see, I think one of my last questions that I want to ask, do you see a lot of people who downsize start to work on these types of projects later in life?
I think that people think of downsizing. Well, first of all, they think of downsizing, a lot of them, as being limited to, I'm living in a house and I'm downsizing my stuff so I can move into an apartment.
Yeah.
But you don't have to be moving to downsize. And if you start downsizing your possessions, if you have a lot of possessions and they're not all equally important, why not get rid of the things that you no longer use? Why not get rid of, donate or gift or sell, some of the things or toss in the trash if they're in poor condition. Get rid of the things that don't serve your current lifestyle anymore, so that somebody else doesn't have to make that decision. And if you've got something that maybe would look like trash to somebody else, you better tell the story, because otherwise it's going to go in the trash or in the donation bin.
Yeah. Well, I can say one thing, listeners, the stories in Hazel's book absolutely support everything that she's talked about here, because the photos make the stories absolutely come to life. And I can completely understand why it is so important now to share those stories. And I can understand why people kind of go, oh, Matt Paxton talks about his legacy list, I'm going to get Hazel's book too, because they're so interlinked with each other. So absolutely brilliant. Hazel, is there anything else that you want to tell our listeners that we haven't talked about before we finish up this podcast?
I guess there's in the book, there's a lot of resources. There's a lot of, names of tools and things to do and brands and genealogy platforms and photo book creating tools and podcasts. And what I want to say about that is, in the book, there's also a section called Be Resourceful, because those things change. and they leapfrog each other in terms of their features and and some of them go out of business. So I have on my website resource roundups that list many of the things I've talked about in the book and that I keep up to date. And there's also some guidance in the book about how to find new resources if something happens to the ones that you thought you were going to use from reading the book.
Yeah. It is, I think, to be honest with you, a part of organizing, decluttering that's not explored enough yet. I think I'm really grateful for you coming on the podcast, Hazel, and talk to us about it, because I think a lot of people are so focused on clutter and stuff, and now time and productivity is really big, photo organizing, but the link between legacies and photos and genealogy, I think, is so interesting. And I think I'm really glad that you wrote this book and came on the podcast to tell us all about it, because I think it's something that can be an amazing hobby if you're interested. It can be an amazing thing to leave your family members, to discuss with your family members while most of the people are still alive, and to ask questions. So I think it can probably bring families closer in kind of giving an understanding of each other. So it must be super satisfying to do that.
It does. It makes us feel more connected to our families to do it.
Yeah. Well, thank you so much for being on the podcast, Hazel. I really appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
You're welcome. And listeners, I will put all the details, the book details, the website. Hazel has got clutter flowcharts as well. There's a YouTube channel. Loads of stuff. I'm going to put it all in the show notes. So have a look at declutterhub.com/189 and you will find all the details there. Or just go to declutterhub.com and then search for Hazel's podcast, and you will find the show notes there. Next week, I'm going to talk about when does a collection become clutter. I'm back with Leslie. Hazel, thanks so much again. And
thanks, Ingrid.
See you soon.
It's fun talking to you. Bye-bye.
Thanks, everyone. Bye, everyone.
Thanks so much for listening to the Declutter Hub podcast. Don't forget to subscribe to us in your podcast player so you don't miss an episode, and we'll see you next week.